Welcome to Season 4 of the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, Wealth Advisor at Moxie Wealth Management. Today on the show, we chat with Matt Shea, estate planning attorney and principal at Lathrop GPM. Matt shares his path to becoming a successful attorney in the Twin Cities, how COVID has affected estate planning, and how he takes pride in maybe not being the smartest person in the room. Matt, welcome. We're here on Zoom. I appreciate you joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
In preparing for this, I don't think we often get to run through some of our honors, but obviously you're a very well-respected estate planning attorney in Minneapolis. I noticed on your list of honors, you were considered one of the best lawyers in America, a 3-time winner for that. But the one I kind of got a kick out of is that you're a 5-time winner as a super lawyer.
Yes.
I love that name. I wish they don't have anything cool like that for advisors. What does it take to be a super lawyer?
Super lawyer is it's been around for a really long time, and it's a peer-nominated organization.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so there's 5-star wealth advisors.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
would probably be the equivalent in your world.
Yeah.
And, kind of once you get on, first you're a rising star for your first 10 years, you can't be a super lawyer. And then after you've been practicing for 10 years, then you can be a super lawyer.
Right. And again, it's just great branding because...
Yeah, it is good branding, isn't it?
Because I would, I was saying I've got some friends that are in politics, right? And whenever they walk up and say, I'm Pete Johnson, state representative or something like that, right? If I were you, I'd be like, Matt Shea, super lawyer.
I don't want to disparage super lawyer, but it's one of these things that has a lot more meaning outside of the legal world than it does within the legal world.
Oh, got it.
Other lawyers tend to tease each other sometimes about being super lawyers. And
yeah. Well, you mentioned the 5-star wealth manager. It's kind of the same deal.
Yeah.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I went to college. I wanted to be a doctor. And I was, in the middle of second year taking pretty much all science classes. And I had an elective political science class. And I really, really enjoyed it and got to know one of my professors and always sort of been an argumentative person.
Yeah.
And I argued quite a bit in that class. And he said, you should consider being a lawyer. And then I mentioned it to my mom and she's like, yeah, I thought about that. I think you'd probably be pretty good at that. So decided to abandon the med school dream and went to be a lawyer. Well,
that's great. And did you know you wanted to be in estate planning law or?
Yeah, not really at all. I mean, I actually do work with a guy who's a 4th generation estate planner. So his entire life, he knew he wanted to be an estate planner, but I can tell you that's an anomaly. There's not many people that grow up and aspire to be an estate planning lawyer. I wanted to be criminal defense. I wanted to help people that were in trouble and try to help innocent people get off and just help people that needed help. And I ended up working for a judge in Ramsey County, and he did a lot of the first-degree murder trials. Anytime somebody was pleading not guilty by reason of insanity or claiming they're incompetent to stand trial, he handled those too. And I was a psych major in college. I ended up being a psych political science major.
Oh, okay.
So I was really interested in that again. I started working for him. And, by the way, he was also the probate court judge in Ramsey County.
Okay.
It turned out that was the majority of what he did. I mean, this other stuff, those things just don't happen very often. So, and then while I was there, I really got to see a lot of stuff. He did a family law rotation. We ended up doing a bunch of asbestos litigation. And I really got to see the attorneys that are in court frequently. I got to see a flavor of them. And by far, the ones who were in the probate court were the most polished, the most cordial, and the most prepared. And I just seemed like the smartest attorneys that I had ever seen. And so I thought, hey, I think that's something I might want to do.
Got it. Have you moved around to a number of different firms or?
I initially, right out of law school, I went to a firm called Ryder Bennett. It was a really great firm. They had a really great estate planning department. The firm ended up closing, and I left shortly before they closed, went to another big law firm downtown Minneapolis. And then when when that firm closed, the practice group that I had been with went over to Great Plant.
What's it like when you're starting out as an attorney? I always hear 80 or 100-hour work weeks or weekends. Is that a requirement? Was that your experience when you were starting out?
I really think it's who you work for and the people that the partners and the attorneys that you're working for and the type of firm that you're at. I generally would work one day on the weekend, and we usually would work 1 or 2 nights pretty late. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. So do you find that there, maybe in your own experience or what you're potentially see from younger attorneys at your firm now, is there burnout with younger people, and has it changed? I guess you think generationally that we always think we worked harder than the next generation works, and I'm sure our parents thought that and all. What's been your experience with that?
Well, we're both Gen Xers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I can say that the generations below us aren't as dumb as us. They look for more balance, more work-life balance, and they're not necessarily willing to do that. So we have had quite a bit of burnout. In our practice group alone, in the estate planning, we've lost 10 people over the course of the last, probably 7 or 8 years, all sort of younger attorneys. Mm-hmm. And actually, most of them go to your area. They go to wealth management, either at family offices or banks, trust companies, things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a Gen X or just the way I thought about it is almost like I only have so many work days, like in a career. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I always thought about what do I want to accomplish in a career? And I don't know if I want to waste, a day where I'm sitting at home doing nothing, or whatever.
Yep.
Anyway, what other kind of stuff brought you, what do you enjoy, I guess, about the estate planning?
Taking complex concepts and making them easy to understand. So trying to bring simplicity out of complexity is something that I've always felt like I've been pretty good at. And in this world, that's really the name of the game. I think in a lot of areas of law, that's the name of the game. But particularly in this world, this is a very technical, there's a lot of tax laws and statutes and rules that govern what we do. And clients assume that we know all that, right? Mm-hmm. And what they want from us is they want guidance and how to best structure their lives within that. I think the other thing that really drew me to it is just the ability to work with people. This is really a people-driven practice area, individual people. I'm not working for a big company. I'm not working for a nameless, faceless client.
Mm-hmm.
These are all real people that have real problems and they need help. So,
right. Your average clientele are really kind of in the high net worth space, right?
Yeah, sort of the high net worth, ultra high net worth, however you define it. Most of the clients that we work with are entrepreneurs, business owners, executives at Fortune 500 companies. So people that have fairly complex financial lives, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that, if you're having an estate that's, 10, 20, 50 million, 100 million, that there's a lot of charitable planning in that process as well.
Yeah, and that's sometimes people will look at what I do and what we do, and we set up a lot of dynasty trusts, right? We set up these trusts that are passing millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in a trust that is going to be in South Dakota, and it's going to be around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's going to avoid estate tax for that. It's not going to be taxed at each generation. So I've had people say, well, how can you do that? And I look at the other side. A lot of times when we do that, we end up creating a big charitable planning component to that same estate plan. Mm-hmm. I like to call it a zero tax estate plan. You use your estate tax exemption in dynasty trusts. You let that sit. That's going to grow. It's going to get, if you structure it right, it's going to continue to grow basically tax-free. And then you can leave the rest of your assets, everything outside of that trust, to charities. So we've helped in the last 20 years, move billions of dollars to philanthropic organizations. And that allows you to sleep at night. We are really making a difference in society and the community by the amount of money that is going into these charitable organizations.
I've often heard that like the percentage of people that are interested in charitable giving, particularly as part of their estate plan, is maybe 1 out of 10. Is it kind of a numbers thing or a math thing where at some level of net worth, the percentage of people that are philanthropic just gets much higher just because it's part of the math? I mean, I assume they want to be good people, but you know what I mean?
You do get to a math problem, right? Because when you're at a certain point, probably $50 million, anything over $50 million that you leave to your kids or to your family, government's going to get half of it. If you're in Minnesota, if you're outside of Minnesota, it's closer to 40%. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes pretty easy. You know, if you leave money to charity, they get 100 cents on the dollar. If you leave $100 to your kids, and they're going to get 50 cents of that, and then the government's going to get 50 cents of that. You give it to charity, charity gets $100. Mm-hmm. So it really is a math game. And then the other thing is I think a lot of people get to the point where they realize, you know, they work with somebody like you and they do these Monte Carlo simulations and realize that the amount of wealth that they've already passed in these trusts is going to be able to support their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids, and enough is enough.
So that's an interesting point for me. And I'm curious about the conversations you have with clients in a general sense around how much is enough for children. I know there's probably not a right or wrong answer, but you know, if somebody has $60 million and 3 kids, does each kid get $20 million? What kind of conversations are you having around the receiver of that money being able to handle it? Or for the donor, for the grantor, I guess is what you would call it. How do you work that out so maybe they don't hurt their kids by the amount of money that they give them? What are your thoughts on that?
We have a lot of conversations with our clients about how can this wealth be a positive influence in kids' lives. I mean, I think worst case scenario is that your kids end up entitled and they live off of the trust. Sometimes people call them trustafarians, right? Mm-hmm. That they're not a productive member of society. Their personality changes because they have this wealth. So I think a lot of it's education, and it's not necessarily something that we do, but we get involved. We have a lot of resources that mm-hmm. we have clients work with other advisors that help them start having conversations with their kids early about the responsibility of having this kind of wealth, mm-hmm. kind of what the parents expect. Mm-hmm. I can tell you when it doesn't work well, when the parents haven't really told the kids about it and have really played it pretty close to the vest, and you know the kids find out about the planning and what the parents have done at death from me. That usually isn't a positive conversation.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, recently the Powerball gets up to $750 million. It's not exactly what we're talking about, but like my world, if somebody was going to give me $1 million, I see how I can make that productive. If somebody was going to give me $100 million, I'd think, oh my gosh, you know, or $700 million. It just seems like potentially the perils of having more than is possibly necessary for generations could be kind of a tough thing to work through.
I think it is. And there's been some stuff done on people who have won the lottery. And I've worked with a number of lottery winners, and they're a really good example. And there's some positive cases, but money definitely doesn't buy happiness.
Right. I've worked with a few professional athletes in my time. The percentage of, for example, NFL players who are bankrupt within 3 years of being out of the league. It's the norm. It's 80%.
It's the norm.
You know,
in some respects, athletes are lottery winners, right? I mean, They were born with athletic skill. Obviously, they have to work hard. They're different than lottery winners in that they have to work to get where they are. Mm-hmm. But in some respects, they were given this incredible talent, but then not necessarily the financial skills to deal with with all that comes with that money.
So is there anything that tends to be a theme or a general sticking point that families run into when they go about this planning process, or something that holds them up from getting to the end? Well,
I mean, I think just in general, we're going to sit down and talk about death, dying, and taxes, right? Those are things that are pretty easy to procrastinate. We can talk about it tomorrow. We don't need to talk about it today. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, I call it decisional paralysis, and it's really hard decisions, right? Let's say you're in a second marriage and there's a blended family, and it's really hard to figure out how to allocate your wealth between your spouse, whom you love, and your kids, whom you love. And there's going to be hurt feelings. There's no perfect answer, and it's going to be difficult. And then business succession planning, which is another big part of what we do. You've got some kids in the business and you've got some kids out of the business, and how do you treat them fairly? Because you can't treat them equally. And that's hard for people to face. So when you take something that's difficult decision, sort of fraught with emotion and conflict, it's pretty easy to procrastinate it.
Right. If we're talking a lot of high net worth people, there's probably different degrees of celebrity. Does that add any complexity to your line of work when you're working with families that might be more public figures or more celebrity?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly adds complexity because most of the time when we're working with high profile people, one of the things that they're going to be concerned about is privacy and anonymity. And so that adds a layer of complexity, but it also frankly makes this type of planning even more important because so much right now is a matter of public record. You can find out who owns most of the homes on Lake Minnetonka right now by knowing the address. And so the more high profile people that you're working with, I think it's even more important to work with somebody that understands the complexities of their lifestyle.
In our world as advisors, of course, we always know the stories of the famous people who didn't plan their estate well or didn't have anything, and mainly because most things are public record, right? Unless assets are owned in trust, which is a private entity. My estate, if I just own things under my name, it's public record, right?
It's all public record. I mean, you're in Hennepin County, right?
Yep.
There's probably 5,000 probate cases that are filed every year in Hennepin County. So most of them go under the radar. But, if you're famous, it's all a matter of public record. And anybody can go down to the courthouse and see what you have and who it's going to. Many high-profile, famous people that pass away where we don't see anything in the headlines about how their wealth is passed and who it's going to, and it's generally because they've done planning.
Yeah, right.
You can keep it out of there if you want.
But so obviously our most recent one in Minnesota is Prince. I don't think he had any documents. Were you familiar to that case or connected anyway?
Yeah, it's all a matter of public record. I actually opened the case, filed the petition that we represented Prince's sister, Tyka Nelson. So we opened the probate case to appoint Bremer Trust as special administrator. So we were very involved with it for about a year. And it's interesting because I actually have 2 or 3 other estates that are somewhat similar that are not high profile at all, but, we're started similar as special administrations, similar, not intellectual property, but very valuable ongoing businesses. And the theme is when you have somebody who dies untimely, whether it's by an OD or they were killed or they committed suicide, or it really just makes for an incredibly complex estate administration because everything is up there. Everything is in their head, right? They know where all the pieces are. They know where all the assets are, but nobody else does. And so trying to piece all of that together can be incredibly complex and expensive.
So speaking of kind of, abruptly or not having it planned, as we're recording now, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. How in 2020 has the pandemic affected you and your business?
It's been the busiest year we've ever had. A pandemic gets people focused on their own mortality, frankly.
Right.
And so it has been a really busy year. 2020 was a really busy year. We also, the election in the midst of it, with the prospect of a changing administration, and potential changes to the tax code. We had a lot of people doing a lot of planning at year end. The pandemic has, from a just pure business perspective, has kept us really, really busy.
So is it fair to say you've helped somebody who was dying or maybe in fact did die of COVID in 2020?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a number of COVID-related estates that we're working on and certainly have done a number of estate plans for people who were diagnosed with COVID. And when I say it's good for business, I always hesitate that the pandemic has been good for business because it's tragic. There's just been a tremendous loss of life. It's been really hard on a lot of people.
So do you mentor younger advisors or attorneys today?
Yeah, quite a bit. I spend a decent part of my work week meeting with and talking with the attorneys that I work with. Part of it is formal mentoring, and part of it is like I'm a formal mentor to 3 attorneys. But then all of the associates and the young partners that I work with, I talk with them on a weekly basis. So there's informal mentoring that goes on as well.
Did you have a strong mentor when you were starting out?
Yeah, I'm so lucky. I still work with her every day. She's one of the people that I talk with on a weekly basis, and she's been my role model for 20 years, and kind of try to emulate her in my practice and mentor the younger attorneys that I work with the way that she did for me.
I think the world deserves to know who she is.
Ann Burns.
Ann.
She's going to be the president of ACTEC this coming year, and she'll be the first Minnesotan to ever be the president of ACTEC.
And for the benefit of everyone listening, what is ACTEC?
Oh, ACTEC. Yeah, it's a herd of nerds. I say that lovingly. I'm a member of ACTEC. It stands for the American College of Trust and Estates Council. You are elected as a fellow, and you need to be elected by your state. There's a limited amount of people in each state that are ACTEC fellows, so it's an honor. I mean, we were talking about super lawyers before, and the real honor on my resume is that I'm an ACTEC fellow. And then so for Ann to be the upcoming president of ACTEC, that's really a feather in her cap. It's throughout all of the nation, they've deemed her worthy to be the president. It's a pretty cool thing.
Wow, that's great. What kind of stuff for younger attorneys, what kind of stuff are you helping them work through? Is it language? Is it consulting with people? Is it technical? I mean, what kind of comes up in those mentoring sessions?
I think in order to be truly successful, you need to really understand your weaknesses and then find ways to compensate for your weaknesses, whether it's certain tools that, like, I'm the worst speller in the entire world. And, I could work on spelling every day and I'm probably not going to improve. So, spell check was pretty important to me, right? Most attorneys and most people that we work with at this firm, it's hard to get a job there. They're great. And they're top of their class their entire life, high school, law school, college. And so they're coming in here and they've just known pretty much nothing but success. And that's great. It's fun and it's invigorating working with people like that. But it also is important to understand that nobody's perfect and then really focus on, they all have strengths, but just figure out what you're not very good at and let's figure out a way to compensate for that.
Right. Do they feel a certain amount of maybe an imposter syndrome? A lot of times with people that I've talked to is that they're in these roles that they don't know that they're the best skilled for that role, even though I'm sure the people at your firm, it sounds like, right, have had some extensive school and training and whatever, but they still think, wait a second, should I be the person that's doing this? Did you have that yourself? Do you help out the younger attorneys now with that, or?
Absolutely, because I am an imposter for sure. I mean, I do not have the credentials, and I fully admit and sort of celebrate that I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I'm in the room with the smartest people. And those are the people that are going to be working with our clients. Of the attorneys that I've mentored, I've probably had 2 or 3 that are similar in that I think I'm good with people, and I really think that's where my strength lies. And there's been a couple of other attorneys that are the same way. And you need to surround yourself with really good, smart, technical people that can help you be successful. And know that in order to be a true success, you can't do everything.
Right.
You have to rely on other people.
Well, and I think you maybe say that in some sense in passing is not a significant deal, but I think it is, which is to have the confidence to tell people you don't know everything.
You have to be humble.
You're right. I feel like when I started out in my career, I felt like every time I sit down with somebody, I need to know the answer to every question that they ask, right?
Yep.
And the older I got, it turned into, that's a great question. I'll find that answer. I don't know that answer, but I'll find it. And I used to feel, was I less than if I didn't know what they were talking about, right? Now I get it. In every career, there's some basics, right, that I think people probably should have. But at this point, for you, for me, for anybody, if you've been around for 25, 30 years doing what you're doing, if somebody asks a question you don't know, it probably is a pretty technical thing. And I think there's nothing wrong with, and it almost makes you more credible to say, I just don't know that, right?
I think that's it right there, Joe. It does. I mean, it rather than just trying to wing your way through it, to say, I don't know the answer, but we can find out.
Right.
People appreciate that a lot more than you trying to come up with some answer.
Is there anything that you would, aside from admitting your own faults or not knowing everything, that might have been the greatest lesson for you that you've learned professionally, or a perspective that you had when you started out that through experience that might have changed?
It's probably what we were just talking about, that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be successful. And knowing, sort of identifying, being humble enough and maybe confident enough to figure out where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and then fill in and work with people that complement you.
Right.
I think a number of attorneys end up still trying to do everything themselves and to trying to be everything, and you can't.
I feel like a lot of people in certain positions feel like I'm the only person that could do this job, that I'm so good that I'm the only one that could do it. And the reality is, if you drop dead tomorrow, somebody else will pick up the pieces, right?
Yep.
With technology and other things, is there anything changing dramatically in the estate planning world? The way you do business, is that evolving to something different than it was 15 years ago, or is it very similar?
Frankly, the Zoom, this has actually impacted our practice, I think, positively, pretty dramatically. I mean, we have a national practice. We work with clients all over, and we would see these clients once a year, or once every 2 or 3 years. Either we'd go out there, or when they were back in Minnesota, most of them have a Minnesota tie. And I'm seeing these clients a lot more now.
Yeah, right.
And it's not. This isn't new technology. But we just didn't use it before, frankly.
Right. Yeah, I used Zoom a little bit before the pandemic. And when I say a little bit, it would be specifically if I had clients in different states or whatnot, but not significantly. But there was probably June or July of 2020 that there was just this epiphany of like, why are we talking on the phone if we can just pop up on the Zoom? The only thing now that I'm sensitive to is maybe it's a gender thing. I don't have to dress up whether or not I'm on Zoom or not. Right? I look the same. Right?
Yeah.
And I have had one gal say to me a while ago, if it's a Zoom, I got to, take a shower, put makeup on, all that kind of stuff. It'd be a lot easier if I didn't have to do that. So maybe Zoom itself will run its course and we'll go back to phone calls. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, with my mentoring with the associates that I work with, because a lot of us are on Zooms frequently, we've moved those to phone calls now.
Oh, you have? So you've already made the turn.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, let me ask you, how would you define success for you? What's the model that you're going after?
I don't mean to be cheesy, but it's just, am I a good person? Am I a good role model for the people that I work with? For my kids, my family? Am I ethical? Am I honest? Am I trustworthy? That's so much more important to me than, any sort of awards and recognition. But the thing is I think if you are that, those come. I mean, I think people reward people that are generally good people.
Yeah, that's great. I think you put it well. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there, Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all your insight on your career and the stuff that you do. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Matt Shea, estate planning attorney and principal at Lathrop GPM. If you'd like to know more about Matt and the work he does, you can find him at lathropgpm.com. Next time on the show, Joe Renslow, Executive VP at Mall of America, joins us. One of the many topics we discuss is her thought process as the pandemic hit in the spring of 2020.
You're thinking, how is this possible? How are we going to get through this? How are we going to survive this? How long is it going to last?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, wealth advisor and founding partner of Moxie Wealth Management. You can learn more about me and my firm at moxiewealthmanagement.com. That's MOXIE wealthmanagement.com. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.